The crystalline spires of New Geneva caught the light of Earth's setting sun as Admiral Sarah Chen reviewed the final confirmation codes on her secure terminal. 20 years of preparation had led to this moment. She allowed herself a small smile as she authorized the last sequence, knowing that across human space, thousands of similar commands were being quietly executed. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Confederation's Central Assembly on Axis Prime, Ambassador David Wong adjusted his simple gray suit, a stark contrast to the ornate biomechanical robes worn by the other species representatives. The massive chamber hummed with the usual cacophony of translated discussions and debates, its acoustic systems struggling to handle the various forms of communication used by the 100 different species present. Wong's wrist computer vibrated twice. The signal. Without ceremony, he stood and approached the central podium. The chamber's AI recognized his movement and automatically amplified his voice. In accordance with Article 7 of the Mutual Cooperation Treaty, I hereby formally notify the Assembly that as of this moment, the United Human Systems is withdrawing from the Galactic Confederation. For 3 seconds, absolute silence fell over the chamber. Then chaos erupted. Impossible, bellowed Arksta, the hive speaker of the Merkt. Their crystalline exoskeleton flashed angry patterns of red and orange. The economic implications alone are precisely calculated, Wong interrupted calmly, as are all other factors. High Administrator Zelak, her tentacles writhing in agitation, raised all 4 of her primary arms. Ambassador Wong, surely we can discuss this. The Confederation has always treated humanity as a junior partner despite our contributions, always overruled our votes in the Assembly, always exploited our innovations while claiming galactic common good. Wong's voice remained steady, but carried an edge of steel. We have discussed this for 20 years. Now we act. Across Confederate space, the carefully laid plans activated. On thousands of worlds, human-designed systems began gracefully shutting down. Not catastrophically, that would cause unnecessary suffering, but definitively. Maintenance protocols locked. Authentication servers went dark. Automated factories paused mid-production. The first panicked reports were already flooding into the assembly chamber. Trade Minister of Cathor's scales had turned pale blue as they read the incoming data. This is madness. Half our deep space mining operations use human-designed equipment. Our medical facilities will continue to function, Wong assured them. Emergency and medical systems will maintain basic operation for 6 months, giving you time to develop alternatives. We are not monsters. But they all knew the truth. Humanity had become so integrated into Confederate infrastructure that even this gentle withdrawal would cause massive disruption. And that was exactly the point. You cannot simply leave, High Administrator Zelak insisted. The treaties. The same treaties you violated 17 times in the past 5 years. Wong tapped his wrist computer, and the chamber's holographic displays filled with documentation. We've recorded every violation, every backdoor deal, every attempt to keep humanity in its place. We're done. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Chen watched as the first wave of non-human ships began their ordered departure from human space. Their exodus was being repeated across every human world and installation. No threats, no violence, just the quiet, implacable execution of prepared protocols. The assembly chamber had devolved into barely controlled chaos. Species were already forming blocks, trying to calculate advantages and disadvantages. The more clever representatives were beginning to realize that this had been long planned, and were wondering what else humanity had prepared. Wong waited for a moment of relative quiet before delivering his final message. The borders of human space are now closed to Confederate traffic. All human worlds and colonies are off-limits to Confederate citizens and vessels. We will defend our sovereignty. He paused, allowing that to sink in. We've prepared data packets detailing the withdrawal protocols and transition periods. Review them carefully. As he turned to leave, High Administrator Zelak called out one last time. "You're making a terrible mistake. The Confederation built modern galactic civilization. You need us." Wong stopped at the chamber doors and allowed himself a small smile. "No, Administrator. You need us. You just never realized how much." The doors closed behind him with a quiet but final click, leaving the assembly to face the dawning reality that humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic civilization without firing a single shot. Dr. Elena Martinez stood in the control center of Nexus Station, Earth's primary data hub, watching cascading streams of information flow across the holographic displays. Each stream represented another system going dark across Confederate space, another carefully placed dependency asserting itself. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the historic nature of what they were witnessing. Her chief systems analyst, Raj Patel, gestured at the main display. "Phase 2 is proceeding exactly as modeled, Director. Confederate response times are actually slower than we predicted. They still haven't realized the full scope." The display showed hundreds of Confederate worlds struggling with suddenly unreliable infrastructure. Not catastrophic failures. Humanity had been too careful for that, but the kind of cascading inefficiencies that would rapidly become impossible to ignore. On the Confederate capital world of Axis Prime, High Administrator Zuilak faced a crisis unlike anything in her species' 1,000-year history. "What do you mean, you can't access the core systems?" she demanded, all four arms gesturing in agitation. The technical specialist, a cybernetically enhanced quantum intelligence, pulsed with frustration. "The human protocols are embedded too deeply. They didn't just build our systems, they built the systems we use to build our systems. The architecture itself is compromised." Across Confederate space, the pattern repeated. Ships discovered their navigation systems were operating at reduced efficiency. Agricultural worlds found their automated harvesters working at diminished capacity. Manufacturing centers watched their productivity numbers steadily decline as human-designed optimization algorithms quietly withdrew their support. In the Confederate Military Command, Admiral Verkath slammed his chitinous appendage against the tactical display. "How did we not see this coming? How deep does their influence go?" His intelligence chief, a merc named Crix, whose crystalline form was clouded with worry, brought up another report. "We're still discovering new dependencies. The humans didn't just sell us technology. They sold us carefully crafted dependencies. Each innovation relied on another, each efficiency tied to a human-maintained protocol. They built a web, and we walked right into it." Back on Nexus Station, Martinez received a priority communication from Admiral Chen. "The Confederate 8th Fleet is conducting exercises near the Orion border. Should we be concerned?" Martinez smiled slightly. "No. Let them posture. They're about to discover another surprise." As if on cue, reports began flooding in from Confederate military installations. Their supposedly independent defense systems, the ones they'd reverse-engineered from obsolete human technology, were reporting mysterious compatibility issues. Nothing that rendered them useless, but enough to make any military action a dangerously uncertain proposition. "They're trying to access the backdoor protocols," Paddle reported, monitoring the incoming data streams. "Should we shut them out completely?" Martinez shook her head. "No. Let them waste resources trying. Every hour they spend attempting to break our systems is an hour they're not spending developing their own solutions. That's been the plan all along." In the Confederate Science Ministry, the reality was becoming painfully clear. Senior researcher Ixel, their foremost expert on human technology, faced the assembled emergency committee. "We didn't just import their technology," he explained, his bioluminescent patterns showing deep distress. "We imported their methods, their protocols, their entire technological philosophy. Trying to remove human influence from our systems would be like trying to remove the foundation from a building while leaving the structure intact." The trade minister, scales now a sickly pale blue, received another devastating report. The Confederate Exchange, their primary financial market, was experiencing unprecedented computational anomalies. The automated systems that had made interstellar commerce possible were becoming increasingly unreliable. How long? High Administrator Zelak demanded. How long until we can restore full functionality? The answers she received were not encouraging. Months to achieve basic stability, years to approach previous efficiency levels, decades to truly replace everything. And that assumed they could develop completely independent solutions, something that was far from certain. On Nexus Station, Martinez watched the chaos unfold with clinical detachment. 20 years of preparation were paying off exactly as planned. Humanity hadn't just built independencies, they had shaped the very way the Confederation approached technology. Breaking free would require more than just replacing systems. It would require completely reimagining how those systems worked. Final status report for Phase 2. Patil announced. All critical systems performing exactly at designated levels. Confederate response patterns within predicted parameters. No unauthorized access attempts successful. Martinez nodded, satisfied. Send word to Ambassador Wong. He can proceed with Phase 3. She turned to look out the station's observation window at the Earth below. Let's see how the Confederation handles the real pressure when their own member species start asking difficult questions about why they're so dependent on a junior partner they never respected. The digital eclipse was only the beginning. The real test of the Confederation's unity was about to begin. Ambassador Maya Patil sat in her private office aboard Sanctuary Station, Earth's designated neutral ground for diplomatic contacts, reviewing the latest batch of encrypted communications. Each message represented another species seeking quiet dialogue with humanity outside official Confederate channels. Another request from the Rim Worlds Coalition, her AI assistant reported. That makes 17 member species in the past week alone. Patil nodded, unsurprised. The Rim Worlds had always been treated as second-class citizens by the Confederation's core powers. Now they saw an opportunity for change. What's their status? She asked, though she already knew. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for years. Their systems are 70% dependent on Confederate standard technology. However, they've maintained several independent development programs in secret. They're better positioned than most for autonomy. On the Confederate capital of Axis Prime, High Administrator Zelak faced yet another crisis meeting. The chamber, once a symbol of unified power, now felt like a pressure cooker of competing interests. The crystalline consensus is threatening to suspend rare earth exports. The trade minister reported, scales shifting to anxiety patterns. They claim our trading protocols are unnecessarily restrictive and demand the right to establish independent exchange systems. The Meridian cluster worlds are calling for emergency review of voting rights, another official added. They're citing humanity's withdrawal as evidence that the current system is unstable. Zilak's tentacles writhed in frustration. The humans hadn't just withdrawn. They'd shattered the illusion of Confederate inevitability. Now every marginalized species was questioning the status quo. Back on Sanctuary Station, Patil met with representatives from the Rim Worlds Coalition. Unlike the grand posturing of Confederate meetings, this was a simple gathering in a quiet conference room. We've watched how you did it, Ambassador Anksubl of the Coalition said, their crystalline form shimmering with excitement. Not just the technology, but the whole approach. You built your independence piece by piece, year by year, while they dismissed you as junior partners. Patil smiled diplomatically. The Confederation made certain assumptions about humanity. We simply allowed those assumptions to persist while we prepared. We want to follow your example. Another coalition member, a being of pure energy contained in a sophisticated field generator, pulsed eagerly. We have resources, technology, populated worlds. What we lack is true independence. And that's what you think humanity can offer. We know it is, Anksubl responded. Your withdrawal proved it's possible. The question is, will you help us? In her secure command center on Earth, Admiral Chen reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Confederation was fracturing faster than even their most optimistic projections had predicted. "The Hive Kingdoms are mobilizing their fleet," her tactical officer reported. "Not toward us. They're securing their own borders against potential Confederate intervention." Chen nodded. The Hive Kingdoms had been one of the first to secretly reach out to humanity, even before the withdrawal. They'd seen which way the wind was blowing. "What about the core systems?" she asked. "Still maintaining the facade of unity, but our deep cover sources report increasing friction. The old power blocks are turning on each other, each trying to claim a larger share of dwindling Confederate resources. On a dozen worlds across the galaxy, secret meetings were taking place. Species that had chafed under Confederate rule for centuries saw humanity's successful withdrawal as a blueprint for their own liberation. The Meridian cluster worlds began quietly upgrading their defense systems with independently developed technology. The crystalline consensus established new trade routes that bypassed Confederate oversight. The Rim Worlds Coalition started redirecting their resource extraction operations away from Confederate control. In the Confederate Assembly, the strain was showing. Minor trade disputes escalated into diplomatic incidents. Ancient alliances began to fray. Species that had been reliable voting blocs for centuries started pursuing their own interests. "They're all watching us," Paddle remarked to her AI assistant as she prepared for another round of secret negotiations, "watching to see if we succeed, if we thrive outside Confederate control. And if we do, then the Confederation will face a choice: evolve or collapse. Either way, the galaxy changes." On Axis Prime, High Administrator Zilak received the latest reports with growing dread. The Confederation had faced rebellions before, but this was different. This wasn't a violent uprising they could crush with superior firepower. This was something far more dangerous, an idea spreading from species to species that there might be a better way. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn from the Confederation. They had shown the galaxy that the seemingly immutable laws of galactic politics were really just convenient fictions maintained by those in power. And now that others had seen behind the curtain, there would be no going back. The Confederate First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, a show of force meant to intimidate. 200 ships, the pride of Confederate military might, arranged in perfect attack formation. Admiral Chen watched their arrival from her command center with clinical interest. "Right on schedule," she noted. "Exactly where we predicted they'd make their statement." "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," her communications officer reported, "demanding we reconsider our reckless actions and return to Confederate oversight." Chen smiled slightly. "Deploy Phase 4. Across human space, hidden installations activated. Quantum sensors, far more advanced than anything the Confederation knew humanity possessed, came online. Defense platforms that had been disguised as ordinary communications satellites revealed their true nature. The Confederate fleet's sensors suddenly lit up with warnings. They found themselves surrounded by a web of defensive systems that hadn't been there moments before. Their supposedly superior scanning technology couldn't even determine the full capabilities of the human defenses. "Message from the Confederate Admiral," the comm officer announced. "They're requesting clarification about our defensive capabilities." "Send them the technical briefing packet," Chen ordered. "The simplified version. Let's not shock them too badly all at once." On Axis Prime, the Confederate Security Council erupted into chaos as they reviewed the data from their fleet. "Impossible." The military overseer sputtered, his warrior-cased markings flaring with agitation. "Their technological level couldn't have advanced this far without us knowing." "Couldn't it?" A quiet voice came from the ancient librarian, one of the few who had opposed the policy of dismissing humanity. "We saw what we expected to see. They showed us what we wanted to see." In the assembly chamber, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Rim Worlds Coalition had formally announced their intention to reevaluate their relationship with the Confederation. The crystalline consensus had suspended all resource exports to Confederate core worlds. The Meridian Cluster had begun dismantling Confederate oversight installations. High Administrators Lilac faced the assembled representatives, all four arms raised for attention. Order. We must have order. Order? The hive speaker of the Merc's crystalline form flashed with derision. The order you speak of was built on oppression and inequality. Humanity has shown us there's another way. The humans are rebels. One of the core world representatives shouted. We should crush them now. Make an example. With what? The Meridian representative interrupted. Your ships that can't navigate properly. Your weapons that depend on human computational systems. Or perhaps the fleet that's currently being humiliated at their borders. In her office on Sanctuary Station, Ambassador Patel received another flood of diplomatic requests. Not just from minor species now. Some of the Confederation's founding members were quietly seeking dialogue. They're starting to realize, she told Admiral Chen during their daily briefing. The Confederation doesn't just face a military or economic crisis. They're facing an existential one. Chen nodded. How many species have formally requested our assistance in achieving independence? 47 as of this morning. 15 more are in preliminary talks. The Rim Worlds Coalition alone represents another 30 species. In the depths of Confederate space, more cracks were appearing. Trade routes were being redrawn. Military units were quietly declaring their loyalty to their home species rather than the Confederation. Ancient alliances were being reconsidered in light of new realities. The Confederate First Fleet attempted a show of force against a Rim Worlds installation. Their weapons malfunctioned spectacularly, not through any human intervention, but because of their own growing instability. The message was clear. The Confederation couldn't even maintain its existing capabilities, let alone force compliance from its members. It's time for Phase 5, Chen announced during an emergency meeting of Earth's Security Council. They're ready for the truth. Across human space, hidden shipyards decloaked. Research installations revealed their true nature. The full extent of human military and technological advancement became visible for the first time. The Confederation had thought humanity's withdrawal was the endgame. Now they realized it had just been the opening move. Humanity hadn't just achieved parity with their former overlords, they had superseded them in nearly every measurable way. How? High Administrators Lilac demanded during an emergency session. How did they advance so far without us knowing? The librarian's answer was simple. Because you never believed they could. The Confederate military's final intelligence assessment was brutally clear. Humanity could have conquered them at any point in the past 5 years. Instead, they had chosen a more subtle path, showing the galaxy that independence was possible, that the Confederate system wasn't inevitable. In the assembly chamber, the Rim Worlds Coalition called for a vote of no confidence in the Confederate leadership. The crystalline consensus seconded the motion. As the votes were tallied, centuries of assumed authority crumbled. The old order wasn't just dying, it was being replaced by something entirely new, something that humanity had carefully nurtured and prepared for. The galaxy was about to change, not through war or conquest, but through the power of demonstrated possibility. 1 year later, the new Geneva space station hung in Earth orbit, its crystalline architecture combining design elements from 100 different species. Inside its Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for a historic moment. Ambassador David Wong, who had delivered humanity's withdrawal declaration, now stood at a different podium. Before him sat delegates from over 300 species, former Confederate members, independent worlds, and newly recognized civilizations. 1 year ago, we chose a different path. Wong began, not just for humanity, but for all species who desired true independence and equal partnership. Today, we formalize that choice. The Galactic Cooperative Alliance Treaty lay ready for signatures, not a document of submission to central authority, but a framework for genuine collaboration between equals. Admiral Chen, watching from her command post, saw the defense fleets of 40 different species conducting joint exercises, not in the rigid formations the Confederation had demanded, but in patterns that reflected each species' strengths and natural tendencies. "Status report," she requested. "Joint fleet efficiency up 30% from last month," her tactical officer reported. When species are allowed to fight as they're naturally inclined, rather than forcing them into Confederate doctrine, remarkable things happen. In the technology sector, the changes were even more dramatic. Dr. Martinez had transformed Nexus Station into a true collaborative research hub. In labs throughout the station, scientists from former Confederate worlds worked alongside human researchers, each bringing their unique perspectives to shared challenges. The breakthrough in quantum communications came from combining crystalline consensus theory with RIM worlds' practical applications and human innovation. She explained to a visiting delegation, "When we stopped trying to force everyone to use Confederate standards, we started seeing real progress." High Administrator Zuilak, now simply Delegate Zuilak, watched the proceedings with a mix of resignation and growing understanding. "We were wrong," she admitted to Ambassador Paddle during a quiet moment. "We thought unity required conformity. We thought strength came from control." "And now?" Patil asked. "Now we see that true strength comes from diversity, from letting each species contribute in their own way." The economic transformation had been equally profound. The rigid Confederate trade systems had been replaced by a network of independent but interconnected markets. Species were free to trade directly, develop their own technologies, and pursue their own paths of advancement. The combined economic output of alliance members has already exceeded Confederate peak levels, reported the trade representative of the RIM Worlds Coalition. "It turns out freedom and fair competition produce better results than restricted markets and controlled innovation." Ambassador Wong concluded his address to thunderous approval, expressed in hundreds of different ways by hundreds of different species. Some flashed lights, others released pheromones, still others pulsed with energy signatures. The cacophony of celebration reflected the very diversity the new alliance was built to protect. In her office overlooking Earth, Admiral Chen received the final report she'd been waiting for. The last Confederate holdout worlds had requested membership in the alliance. The transformation was complete. "They said we needed them," she mused to her staff. "They never considered that what the galaxy really needed was an example, a proof that there was another way." Humanity had done more than break free from Confederate control. They had shown the galaxy that independence didn't mean isolation, that cooperation didn't require submission, that unity could be achieved through respect rather than force. The new Geneva Treaty was ratified unanimously, not through coercion or political maneuvering, but through genuine consensus. Each species had examined the proposal, suggested modifications, and chosen freely to participate. As the ceremony concluded, Ambassador Wong shared a quiet moment with the ancient librarian, who had once warned the Confederation about underestimating humanity. "You knew, didn't you?" Wong asked. "You saw what we were really doing." The librarian's crystalline form sparkled with amusement. "I saw a species that asked questions instead of accepting answers, that borrowed our knowledge but developed their own wisdom, that learned our strengths but never forgot their own." A pause. "I saw the future." As ships from 100 worlds departed New Geneva Station, their paths traced new routes through space. Not the rigid lanes of Confederate commerce, but an organic network of cooperation and exchange. Humanity had not only survived their withdrawal from the Confederation, they had led the galaxy into a new age of true partnership. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if reflecting the hope of countless species now free to forge their own destinies while standing together as equals. The age of the Confederation was over. The age of the Alliance had begun.